China has responded in Donald Trump's trade war, halting orders of Boeing aircraft.
With the U.S. says it reportedly orders Chinese airlines to stop taking deliveries of Boeing planes and to not buy the aircraft-related equipment from American companies.
China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S.
China is ordering its airlines not to take any further deliveries of Boeing jets. That's according to a Bloomberg report. The move becoming the latest chapter in President Trump's trade war against China. For more, we're going to bring in now.
This morning, the trade war with China is escalating. Beijing announcing new restrictions on certain American-made products.
China's skies were darkening. 1.4 billion Chinese cry out, "We want to fly," with American quality. It was once a symbol of comfort and modernity, carrying Chinese passengers across the sky. But now, Boeing is fleeing China. Hundreds of millions of Chinese are angry at Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party because they are used to traveling with the flying fortresses of the US. Now that dream is crumbling. This is not just a matter of airplanes. This is a symbol of the trade war in the sky between China and America. And that war is now on the shoulders of ordinary travelers. Let's take a look at the details of this news that has plunged the Chinese people into depression. The tariff wars launched by US President Donald Trump are not limited to steel and technology. The giant birds soaring in the skies have become one of the invisible but most dramatic victims of this economic war. China imposed high tariffs on US products. This decision directly targeted the American aerospace giant Boeing. Boeing's sales to China were first reduced and then cancelled. Airplanes began to wait in hangars in the US, not in the skies over China. And the most striking move, China decided to send back a brand new Boeing 737 MAX aircraft it had ordered due to increased taxes. The plane, whose price of about $55 million turned into a luxury toy with 125% tax, returned to Boeing headquarters in Seattle, even though it carried the colors of Xiamen Airlines. The 5,000-mile, 8,000-kilometer return journey included fuel stops in Guam and Hawaii. But the jet was actually ready to go, with final preparations completed at the Boeing Delivery Center in Zhoushan, China. But this trade war has completely changed its course. After the Trump administration imposed tariffs of up to 145% on Chinese goods, Beijing imposed a 125% tariff on US products. Export-oriented companies like Boeing have been hit hard in this new economic climate. IBA, an aviation consulting firm, estimates that the market value of a new 737 MAX is about $55 million. This means that Chinese airlines face serious financial risks in the face of these taxes. Moreover, the Chinese government recently ordered domestic airlines to stop buying American aircraft parts and equipment. Yet China will account for about 20% of the expected global demand for airplanes in the next 20 years. At the end of March, Boeing had 130 airplanes on its order book for delivery to China. At the moment, however, many deliveries are in limbo. Speaking in the Senate on the day Trump announced the tariffs, Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg said that the company sells 80% of its airplanes abroad, and that the closure of some markets poses a major threat. As can be seen, uncertainty is growing in the aviation industry. Some airlines are considering postponing aircraft deliveries. Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary, for example, said that they may postpone the 25 Boeing planes they will take delivery of from August and that they hope common sense will prevail. The tariff war and the apparent U-turn on deliveries come as Boeing is recovering from a nearly 5-year import freeze on 737 MAX jets and a previous round of trade tensions. Analysts note that confusion over changing tariffs could leave many aircraft deliveries in limbo, with some airline CEOs saying they would delay delivery of planes rather than pay the duties. And here's the kicker. The people, not the airplanes, are the casualties of this war. The middle class living in China's big cities loves to travel. Convenient, fast, comfortable. For years they enjoyed this comfort on Boeing airplanes. But now, due to state policies, they are deprived of this experience. There is a reaction spreading quietly on social media. We cannot fly. We have become a superpower that only lands on the ground. So, this crisis affects the whole of China, a country of 1.4 billion people. For almost 1.4 billion Chinese, there will no longer be the comfort and quality of the American Boeing they are used to. The Chinese Communist Party is aware of this discomfort, But it continues to take a tough stance against the outside world. It has halted deliveries of Boeing airplanes and suspended the purchase of American aircraft parts. These decisions directly affect Chinese airlines and passengers. The Chinese government is trying to promote the COMAC C919, a domestically produced aircraft. However, this aircraft is not yet fully ready and has not yet gained the trust of the public. Even Airbus is struggling to fill this gap. What the Chinese Communist Party calls pride is turning into suffering for the people. Moreover, as the Boeing crisis deepened, Beijing's statement was chilling. Countries that cooperate with the US should know that their relations with China will deteriorate. This was a direct threat. China was declaring war not just on an American aircraft manufacturer, but on an alliance. Anyone who worked with the US was now facing China. But there is an overlooked fact. What China needs is airplanes, not threats. In response to President Trump's pressure with tariffs, Beijing has resorted to the carrot and stick tactic. Appeasement does not bring peace. Compromise does not earn respect. He said that seeking benefits in exchange for so-called exemptions was tantamount to asking the tiger for its skin. In other words, China has declared that it will respond to any step that puts its economic interests at risk. These harsh statements came on the heels of Chinese President Xi Jinping's diplomatic mission to Southeast Asia. By signing trade agreements with Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia, Xi sought to present China as a staunch defender of global trade. This was in stark contrast to Trump's harsh and uncertain economic policies. But things are not so simple on the global stage. As the US and China impose record tariffs on each other, countries are caught between two giant economic powers. Despite Beijing's tempting offers, many countries see the US as the bigger and more stable market. In this environment, China's calls for partnership have limited impact. Moreover, China's aggressive trade policies, regional military moves, and its own history of economic repression make it even more difficult to build trust. Elizabeth Economy of Stanford University summarizes the situation. China may be a bigger trading partner, but America is usually a bigger export market. Xi Jinping's economic charm offensive is overshadowed by Beijing's military ambitions in the region. On the one hand, China wants cooperation, but on the other, it continues to show its military might against countries like Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines. After all these developments, the question is, can Airbus fill the gap in China? The gap created by Boeing's withdrawal from China is a great opportunity for Airbus. However, this transition is not easy for China. Airbus's systems are not compatible with China's existing aviation infrastructure. Moreover, Europe's closeness with the US raises some question marks in China. For an industry accustomed to Boeing, switching to Airbus requires an adaptation process. Especially for pilots and engineers, it takes time to get used to these new systems. When boarding a plane, even a small detail can show which brand it belongs to. For example, Airbus doors open parallel to the fuselage, while Boeing doors open diagonally. The difference is even bigger in the cockpit. Boeing airplanes have more traditional mechanical controls. Airbus, on the other hand, uses a technology that works with digital systems and puts some limits on pilots. This has an impact on flight style. Airbus and Boeing have been sharing the skies of the world since the 1970s. While airlines sometimes use both brands together, sometimes they prefer only one of them. Behind these preferences lie both cost and operational factors such as training and maintenance. Today, both companies operate not only in passenger aircraft, but also in military and space technologies. While Airbus has a particularly strong market share in civil helicopters, Boeing is more active in military projects. Airbus is trying to fill the gap in China, but it is not easy. Adaptation issues, technical transition pains, and geopolitical reservations complicate the process. For an industry accustomed to Boeing's digital systems, the transition to Airbus means not only a technical, but also a cultural change. But China's eyes are not only on Western manufacturers. It wants to produce its own airplanes and build its own skies. That's why COMAC is coming on the scene. China's own aircraft manufacturer COMAC is showing off its C919 model. However, this aircraft is not yet at the level of Boeing or Airbus. According to experts, the C919 has serious hurdles to overcome. Lack of international certification, limited production capacity, and a safety record that has yet to be established. So China's intentions are clear: to build an independent aviation future. But deep down, it also knows this: there is still a US shadow in the sky. China's decision to send Boeing back was more symbolic than economic. The Xi Jinping administration wanted to show strength against the West. But millions of Chinese citizens are not happy with this decision. While the comfort of travel they are accustomed to is being taken away from them, the state's mere production of propaganda is provoking reactions. The plane that was sent back carried with it the disappointment of the public. As a result, trade wars have now materialized. An airplane is not just a means of transportation. It is a symbol of diplomacy, prestige, and power. China sent a message to the US. We don't need your products anymore. But the reality is that China is still an import-dependent giant. Especially in the airplane industry, Boeing's flight from China is a harbinger not only of the present, but also of the future. The US is trying to isolate China economically. China is giving up the comforts of its people to show its resistance. At this rate, there will be a huge wave of dissatisfaction in China's airline transportation sector. And this wave could affect not only flights but also public confidence. After all, every airplane has a pilot. But not every pilot can choose where to land. China's aviation policy may feed nationalism in the short term, but in the long term, it is angering the public. Boeing's comeback is not just a flight. It has exposed China's dilemmas, public outcry, and economic reality. This war is far from over. Time will tell which side will fly higher in the next takeoff. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to follow the developments closely. Thank you for watching us.